What's up, MetaDreamer?
Not much, Owocki. What's going on?
So which one of us is doing the David Hoffman impression? Let's just get that out of the way.
I don't know. I feel like you'd be better at it.
Yeah, I don't know if I have that energy level at this point in the morning.
You just have to be like looking like directly at the camera with like high energy and be like talking like a YouTube influencer who's like trying to sell you on their course, but it's actually like crazy shit. But you know, it's like the eyes, the green plants.
Maybe we get a couple YouTube covers, like clickbaity covers, out of this panel. Yeah. All right, that's enough hazing of David for not being here and for being in San Diego. But we are here to talk about coordination. So first question, hardball, is it all coordination, MetaDreamer?
It's all coordination, and it always has been.
There we go. Why do we care about... Isn't it funny when a space that cares deeply about coordination has its own coordination failure and you're told you have to be up on stage with 3 minutes notice?
Yep.
So why do we care about coordination in the Ethereum space, and why is it a special meme?
You know, coordination at the end of the day is how we like accomplish anything, and even being humans, like the thing that defines humans from animals is like the fact that we're able to coordinate together at a larger scale. So I think, you know, in the Ethereum space where we have like better tools for coordination now, but none of these ideas are new, and people have been, you know, trying to tackle them for a very, very long time. So yeah, we have like new tools to tackle how to become more human and, you know, continue on that journey that we've been on for like millions of years, from like fungus till our brains.
So why is Ethereum a better substrate for human coordination?
Well, it's the one everyone uses and the one all this gigabrains are building on, so that works.
Right.
Goes pretty far.
Yeah, I guess my answer, my sort of thought there is that we have a transparent, immutable, programmable coordination mechanism that's worldwide in jurisdiction. So if we have these global coordination failures around misinformation or climate change, privacy violations, really there's a lot of coordination failures that are the infrastructure that we inherited from the previous generation is no longer able to handle. And one of my thoughts is that this transparent, immutable, programmable ledger is a place to solve coordination failures. And that's why you hear Gitcoin talk a lot about funding public goods, which is one of the big coordination failures out there, and leveraging Ethereum. And my hope is that you know, DeFi is great and financing art is great, but what I really would love to see is us moving past a decentralized casino and into really having a positive impact for the world. And I think that that's possibly Ethereum's legacy.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, you know, Vitalik's been talking about this recently too, the idea of like retroactive public goods funding. And, you know, Gitcoin, I think, is the most successful example of like public goods funding at scale in the Ethereum ecosystem. And, you know, it's interesting to think about, you know, what he was saying, which is, it's a lot easier to decide what has worked well in the past than to sort of predict what will work well in the future. So we can create mechanisms for deciding collectively what things were built well that should be funded, looking retroactively instead. So yeah, what's your take on retroactive public goods funding, and you know what the meta of that has to do with like the next like year of what we're doing in DAOs?
Yeah, so for those who aren't familiar, retroactive public goods funding is something that Vitalik Buterin and Carl Flourish announced at ETHCC. And basically the idea is to take the fees from Optimism, which is an L2 network that recently launched, and then to allocate them to funding public goods, I think in the Ethereum community. And part of the idea is that Optimism is generating tens of thousands of dollars per fees in fees per day, which is really amazing. And if we can find a legitimate way to give that to the most important public goods in the Ethereum community, you know, if only there was a mechanism that could distribute to public goods. That's my little Gitcoin shill right there. But the whole end game is that if you have the opportunity for a team that's working on public goods to have a multi-million-dollar exit, then what you incentivize is the possibility that maybe angel investors and VCs will start to fund teams that are creating value instead of just capturing value. And it could be a sea change in how public goods are funding. We can move from the grants and donation type model to a more profit-driven type model. That's my understanding of retroactive public goods funding, but y'all should look up the blog post if you want to get the canonical version from Vitalik and Carl.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's really exciting, and this, especially when you have that way to fund retroactively, but still have the mechanism for what venture capital is now. Then you would have this almost curation game or prediction market in the future, where people are essentially like staking their money on a certain team succeeding in what they'll say they'll succeed in. And the important part to make that happen is we need to have like the defined protocols and standards for retroactive funding, so people have that sort of knowledge or security in their mind that if this thing succeeds, it is going to get paid, or there is going to be value that flows here. So yeah, I think the tooling and protocols and everything we build around that's going to be really important. In the last year in DeFi especially, we figured out really great ways of concentrating a lot of capital from a lot of different places into one place. So yearn vaults, or liquidity farming, and all these things, or even NFTs. It's really effective at moving large amounts of capital. But what we need now, I think, is tooling to then also distribute it, not just concentrate it, but how can we better distribute these large amounts of capital? And these DeFi protocols become almost these shelling points for capital to come, and then we can delineate between the thing that gets funded and where it's being funded from or why. So we don't need to monetize everything, because that's an issue with a lot of public goods, is not everything can be turned into a product and monetized, and it shouldn't be writing documentation and open source software and packages and libraries, and a lot of this stuff, it shouldn't be monetized. So how do we get those things funded? And I think the answer for that is allowing the source of funding to be something that is monetizable, but allowing it to flow to things that aren't monetizable, because those things help everyone and it's necessary for the space to survive.
Yeah, totes. The asymmetry between value created and value captured is what we need to close. So open source software creates $500 billion per year in economic value, and open source software developers are often working away from their families nights and weekends to maintain that digital infrastructure, which is an asymmetry that is not only immoral, but it also creates black swan events because the open source maintainers can't spend time creating real solid digital infrastructure. And so I imagine this world where software developers can quit their corporate jobs and just work for the open internet. We can get straight out of school and do an internship with open source instead of this large corporation. Instead of working on an ICO or a privatized project, you can just work on public goods, and that can be your career. And that's the world that we want to create at Gitcoin.
Yeah, so speaking about bringing in talent from the legacy space or Web 2 into Web 3, I know you and Austin recently started Moonshot Collective, which I think is really cool, and a shortage of talent in Web 3. Talent is the most scarce resource right now in Web 3. Anyone who's trying to hire devs or designers or anyone to build anything, they know the issue, and so really having a huge funnel for talent to come into this space is critical. And I'd love to hear more about Moonshot and how you guys are coordinating all that, because it's one thing just to get people in the door, but how do we get people from in the door to actually doing productive work and impacting the space and finding what they need for their own fulfillment as well?
Yeah, so Gitcoin's got a couple mechanisms that you can get coins if you're a software engineer. It's my marketing guy in the back. He was like, say Gitcoin a lot while you're up there. He didn't say that, I just did it myself. So we've got hackathons, which we can pull you into the space with. We've got grants, which you can get funded with. And the Gitcoin DAO recently launched, which was, the whole idea there was to create a closed value loop where the community that we're serving is governing Gitcoin. So that's something I'm really proud of. And we have this core primitive for organizing work within the DAO called a work stream. And there's a public goods funding work stream, there's a governance work stream, there are a decentralized Gitcoin work stream. We've got some centralization debt we're trying to pay down there. And the one that Austin and I launched was called the Gitcoin DAO R&D Rapid Prototyping Work Stream. And we announced it, and we I don't think people really noticed it, so we're like, let's call it something cool and memey. So we called it the Moonshot Collective. which is a collective of people who are taking moonshots, basically creating new coordination tools. And we've got about 150 builders that we are prototyping new coordination tools. And the first tools that we built are actually token allocation tools for the Moonshot Collective to allocate tokens to itself for building token allocation tools. So there's a little bit of a loop there.
Meta.
Yeah, meta. Yeah, it's a meta dream. These coordination tools are all the way from just very simplistic small utilities to things like quadratic funding, which is really powerful, but it's a little bit complicated. And the first tool that we built is actually launching at MetaCon today, and it's called tip.party. And I think I'd like to demo it with y'all now, if so tip party is what it sounds like. If you go to tip.party on any Ethereum-enabled device, oh God, we didn't tell the developers to make any Ethereum wallet work. It works in MetaMask. I'll be curious to see. Okay, it's because it's built on Scaffold ETH, right? Yeah, there you go. So if you go to tip.party, and there's going to be a little landing page that sort of explains what it is. A tip party is basically you just sign in with a message, and then Austin and I will drop some tokens to you just for being a part of the tip party. So go to tip.party, open the app, and then the keyword is coordination. And if you sign in with the message coordination, Austin and I will get your address, and then after about, I don't know, 5 or 10 minutes, we'll drop some tokens to everyone in the audience. So this is a very small coordination tool that the Moonshot Collective is prototyping in order to allow members of the collective that are consistently showing up to calls or being active in Telegram groups. It's just an easy way for us to kind of like create a tip party. So it's a very small modular coordination tool, and I think this will probably be the largest tip party that we've done, Austin, if it works. So we're going to drop those tokens probably sometime in the next 5 or 10 minutes.
What's the room name?
Coordination is the room name.
Austin's the king of just like dropping dope shit in the middle of a conference.
Yeah. So and that's what the Moonshot Collective is. We're building these small tools for token allocation and distribution and coordination. I think that there's public goods funding problems and like prisoner's dilemma and like more advanced coordination failures. If we can just create small shelling points as composable money Legos and then build on top of those towards the more advanced ones, then that's how we get momentum. So we start by solving our own coordination issues, and then we solve all of technology's coordination issues, and then we can work our way up to solving all of the world's coordination issues, and then we can slay Moloch in the world's coordination failures.
Yes. Yeah, so I think it's amazing too to see how this like whole conference came together. I think, you know, it was really you that posted it sometime in Twitter, like back in 2019, maybe, like about like Cathedral and the Bazaar, and like the two different ways of like software development of, you know, Cathedral, which is like, we got to design everything perfectly, kind of like Cardano style, you know, like, versus just like,
well, I don't know.
People like on the ground, like just like organically doing things, like things coming together. Like this conference and, you know, everything that happened was like, it's so much more awesome than any of us organizers even expected, which is because like everyone just put in their little bit that they could, you know, the unique thing that they could offer, and just came together, and all these like little building blocks of like, hey, I do video, but I don't have an audio guy. Oh, this guy does audio. Oh, this guy's a 3D printer. This guy's a sewing machine. This guy's a printing company. And, you know, we have all these dope signs made just yesterday, and like all this stuff that just meshes together because people are out there kind of communicating, and there's these shelling points. So yeah, I think it's really exciting to see it like play out in person, and for us to use the tools that we're creating to help ourselves first, and, you know, before we try to like convert the whole world to use it. And I think that's really how it's going to happen is eventually this is just going to outcompete the legacy way of doing things, and people will just migrate over. It's not going to be some sort of like crazy, we're going to tear down the system. It's just going to be like a new one's going to boot up in parallel, and people are slowly going to migrate over, and the old one's going to fade away. So yeah, it's pretty cool to like be a part of that at the ground level.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that this is a really special point in time. I just think about how big the internet was and the ability to send information across a computer network without an intermediary revolutionized everything that depended on information in society: entertainment, media, politics, all social media. And now we're in this really interesting point in which you can move scarcity or value across a computer network without an intermediary. And so the parallel is, what are all the things that rely on finance and scarcity in society? Turns out a lot of stuff. And if we can reinvent banking, insurance, jobs, and create fundamentally internet native coordination mechanisms for the world, I think that that could be a really good thing. But I also got to say, low key, it could get pretty dark pretty quick. And so coordination is a choice, and we all have to choose to coordinate and to turn the battleship towards utopia and away from dystopia. And I think that we have to choose to show up and coordinate and be our best selves and build community first every day. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity, but also a lot of threat as the whole world's financial ecosystem could be rebuilt by blockchain technology. And that's the legacy of the people in this room today. When you look at the future history of this space, hopefully it's a positive one.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's really important because things are going well, and when things are going well, it's easy to just be like, oh, everything's amazing, everything we're doing is awesome. We couldn't make any mistakes whatsoever. I think that's kind of the same thing that happened with the people working at Facebook and Google early on. They didn't expect all the negative consequences of social media. At that time, it was like a really powerful, impactful, world-changing, good thing, and it still is in a lot of ways. And I still think it's a net positive. But if we're not conscious about all the ways in which we could be designing systems that are going to cause harm in places, or could be dangerous, and the ways in which we should try not to, because it's hard for us too. It's like almost a time thing. Like, we ourselves are born and grew up in these legacy systems, so we're prone to repeat those same patterns, whether we like it or not. It's built into our DNA almost. So it takes a lot of unlearning on our own part to destructure the structures in my mind, or in our minds, for how we think things should work, and redoing them in much more collective, almost biomimicry ways, where we can resemble nature more, and things not being wasted or destroyed. And even the concept of garbage is a human concept. Garbage doesn't exist in nature. It just, everything just transforms into something else and gets reused. So I think with Ethereum, we have the better tools now to move towards that, in how we operate as a species. And yeah.
I think that, yes and to everything that you said. One of the problems I have is that I'm too cerebral and verbose, and so my narratives don't scale too much. And so I've been trying to figure out the memified way that we tell the world that it's all coordination. And so that scalable narrative that we can roll forward with is what I've been working on. And I just want to, I'm just curious. Amin talked a lot about Meditations on Moloch in the intro talk. How many people have read Meditations on Moloch? All right, that's a good amount of people. That's great. We're trying to figure out how to tell that deep lore of the Ethereum space to Ethereum adjacent communities and to the mainstream. And so one of the things that the Gitcoin team has produced is a comic book about how we could create a Megazord that destroys Moloch using coordination technology, which I think would be pretty cool. So I don't know. It feels like the mainstream, they like Avengers and superhero stuff. So that's going to be how we try to scale that narrative to the mainstream. But curious for everyone's feedback. Come find me and I'll give you a copy of the comic book. Looks rare. Yeah, thanks, Austin.
Kevin's the Tony Stark of Ethereum.
Yeah, maybe, I think Joe Lubin's the Tony Stark.
That's true.
Be happy to be. Yeller is telling us that our time is over. So last question, MetaDreamer, is it all coordination?
It's all coordination and always has been.
Peace, everyone.
Let's give it up.